Allie never expected humiliation to come wrapped in champagne and roses. But here she was, sitting in the third row of her sister's wedding. Her son Benji swung his feet beneath the white linen-draped table, eyes wide at the towering chandeliers overhead. She smoothed her navy dress, the only one formal enough to pass at such an occasion, borrowed and pressed the night before. Her hand still carried the faint scent of vanilla from the pancakes she'd made for Benji that morning, trying to make the day feel festive, even if her own nerves had been on edge since sunrise. Across the aisle, Emily sparkled, literally. Her beaded gown shimmered under the afternoon sun pouring through the tall windows of the foundry at Oswego Point. She looked like a page from a bridal magazine, surrounded by roses and people who knew how to belong. Allie sat up straighter when Emily walked past. "Oh, you made it," Emily said, her voice light but not warm. She glanced at Benji. He's gotten big. That was it. No hug, no real smile. Just a drive-by acknowledgement. As if Allie had RSVP'd to a business seminar, not her sister's wedding. Margaret, their mother, floated past moments later, all pearls and perfume, offering no glance in Allie's direction. Her laughter drifted lightly toward someone else's table. Benji tugged Allie's arm. "Mom, this place is like a movie." She smiled, brushing a hand over his soft hair. "It is." The quartet began playing a soft rendition of Moon River. Allie's seat creaked slightly as she shifted, trying to settle into the strange comfort of invisibility. The server passed by with flutes of champagne. She declined. Her table, table 9, was near the restrooms. Fitting. At the head table, Emily was radiant, framed perfectly by gold-draped chairs and smiling bridesmaids. Ryan, the groom, looked as put together as a man could get. Black suit, clean lines, composed face. His eyes, for the briefest moment, moved from the crowd to Allie. It was the kind of look that didn't linger but held weight. Recognition, perhaps, or curiosity, she couldn't tell. She looked away first. Benji leaned into her arm. "Do you think they have chocolate cake?" "I'm sure they do." They sat quietly through the ceremony, hands occasionally brushing. When the officiant declared Emily and Ryan husband and wife, the room erupted in applause. Allie clapped too, just once or twice, restrained and steady. She had practiced this kind of quiet strength. As the room shifted toward cocktail hour, a woman seated nearby leaned toward her friend, whispering behind a manicured hand. "She's the sister. Oh." The words floated in and lodged themselves just behind Allie's ribs. She didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. Benji looked up, tracing her profile with his gaze. "Why doesn't Grandma talk to you?" Allie swallowed hard and smiled down at him. "Let's get some water, okay?" Benji thought the chandelier looked like a spaceship. Allie thought it looked like something that didn't belong to her world. Table 9 sat awkwardly near the swinging kitchen doors and restrooms, a place where servers flowed in and out like clockwork. It wasn't that she expected to sit at the front, but something about being positioned here, slightly hidden, felt deliberate. Benji was too enchanted to notice. He pressed his face close to the folded place cards, reading names he didn't recognize. "They have fancy letters like fairy tale books," he whispered. Allie smiled faintly. "They do." Margaret's voice, crisp and polished, cut through the low hum of the reception. "Emily always knew how to bring people together," she said to the woman seated next to her. "She's our pride, always has been." Allie sipped water and focused on her breathing. The comment wasn't meant to hurt. No, it was meant to be heard. A passing server dropped off salads with practiced grace. Benji poked at his greens suspiciously. "Is this the crunchy stuff from last week?" "Kale," she said. "You don't have to eat it." He smiled in relief and reached for the roll instead, knocking his cup slightly. A drop of water landed on his tie. "Oh no," he muttered. Allie leaned in quickly, dabbing with her napkin. "It's okay," she said, patting it gently. "No one's looking." But someone was. From the head table, Ryan's gaze flickered in her direction again. It wasn't the look of someone watching a stranger. There was something in it, quiet, calculating, almost concerned. Emily, meanwhile, was mid-toast to the bridesmaids, her voice bright and effervescent. Every line landed like she'd rehearsed it a dozen times. Guests laughed easily. A woman across from Allie whispered, "She could be on television." "She's always been charming," her friend replied. Another round of champagne floated through the room. Allie declined again. Margaret caught her glance and raised an eyebrow, then turned away, sipping hers elegantly. The mousse dessert arrived early for the children, and Benji grinned with delight. But within seconds, a dark smear appeared on his tie again. Allie shook her head, amused, and pulled a wipe from her purse. As she leaned in to clean, she heard it. "She's the older sister, right?" one guest asked from 2 tables over. "Yeah, the one with the kid," another answered. "Oh," came the response. The tone said the rest. Allie's hand froze momentarily before she continued dabbing the chocolate from Benji's tie. She kept her smile. "They think I'm weird," Benji said quietly, picking up on something, anything. "No," she said firmly. "They don't know you." Ryan turned his head then, fully. Their eyes met. Margaret clinked her glass for attention. "To family," she said, lifting her flute. "To the ones who make us proud." No one looked at Allie. Benji leaned closer. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Why did she say that like you're not family?" Allie's throat tightened. She looked around the room, chandeliers glinting like stars above her. Somewhere near the bar, Emily posed for a photo with her friends. All effortless perfection. Allie glanced back at her plate. Maybe she should have declined the invitation. Maybe showing up was the real mistake. But then Benji squeezed her hand, and she held on. The lights dimmed just slightly as the reception slid into the next phase. Laughter floated like perfume across the room. Clinking glasses, the soft hum of a jazz standard. Everything shimmered with the polish of practiced perfection. Allie sat upright, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Napkin creased between her fingers. Benji swung his legs beneath the table, his cheeks still dotted with the remnants of chocolate mousse. He looked at her and grinned. The first toast came from the best man, a college friend of Ryan's, loud, tan, slightly too casual, offered a string of mildly funny stories that made the room chuckle politely. Emily laughed in all the right places, her hand grazing Ryan's sleeve. Then it was Emily's turn. She rose, champagne flute in hand, eyes alight with the glow of her perfect evening. "I want to thank everyone," she began, her voice floating, confident. "This is the happiest day of my life, surrounded by people who mean everything to me." Allie allowed herself a small breath. Maybe, just maybe, this part would pass without incident. Emily smiled toward the head table, then slowly turned her attention outward. "And of course, I want to say something about my big sister." Allie blinked. Benji straightened in his chair. The room stilled, some eyes turned. Emily continued, her smile soft but sharp. "Allie's always been a strong example." Benji's face lit up. "She's the bravest woman I know," Emily said sweetly. "Raising a child all on her own, no partner, no help. Just her, and whoever happened to be kind enough to babysit." The room shifted, a murmur of confused laughter. Allie's stomach dropped. "But seriously," Emily added, "it's amazing how she manages. A single mom, unwanted by anyone, and still showing up. That's real resilience." The laughter came louder this time. Raw, unfiltered. Allie felt the air leave her lungs. She didn't move, couldn't. Her body froze while her mind ran, fast, fractured. Benji turned toward her, his brow furrowed. "Why are they laughing, Mom?" She couldn't answer, her jaw clenched, her chest burned. From the far end of the room, Margaret's voice chimed in, clear, sharp, and just loud enough to cut. "She's a used product," she said to her table, smiling. "But she still polishes up well." Another wave of laughter, this time cruel, intentional. Allie's face flushed hot. Her vision blurred at the edges. She curled her fingers tighter around the napkin, grounding herself in the only thing she could touch. She scanned the room. No one looked at her. Not the cousins who'd once played tag in Grandma's backyard. Not the aunt who used to braid her hair. Not even Uncle Dan, who'd once told her she had her father's courage. Every face turned away, except one, Ryan. From the head table, he wasn't laughing. He wasn't smiling. His eyes were locked on her, unmoving. Allie looked away. Benji leaned in, whispering, "Why did Aunt Emily say that? What does she mean?" Allie swallowed, hard. I don't know, sweetie." But she did. And it wasn't the words that hurt most. It was the sound of the people who were supposed to love her, choosing to laugh instead. The final chords of the toast hung in the air as Emily raised her glass. "To family," she said. Glasses clinked. Allie didn't raise hers. Her son reached for her hand under the table, She squeezed it tightly, and somewhere inside something cracked open, not to break, but to breathe. Benji's small hand gripped hers beneath the table, warm and trembling. Allie could hear her own breath now, sharp, shallow, too loud in her ears. The laughter still echoed, but it had already begun to fade, leaving behind a heavier silence. "Why did Aunt Emily say that, Mom?" Benji whispered again, more afraid this time. Allie opened her mouth to answer, but her throat tightened, dry as dust. She couldn't explain cruelty dressed as comedy. She couldn't undo what had just been done. She stood slowly, knees trembling. The linen napkin slipped from her lap to the floor. "Come on, Benji," she whispered. He nodded without question, his smile long gone. The two of them turned toward the side of the room, toward the exit, their quiet escape. Then a chair scraped loudly against polished wood. Allie froze. So did the room. Ryan stood, still in his black suit, still the groom, but something had shifted. His face was pale, jaw clenched, and he didn't look at Emily, didn't look at Margaret. His eyes were fixed on Allie. She turned halfway, confused, halfway pleading, "Please don't add to this." But Ryan didn't smile. He didn't pick up his glass. He walked toward her. The room fell into an unnatural hush, as if no one dared to breathe too loudly. Ryan stopped just short of the table. "Allie," he said, his voice steady, "please don't go." The words rang like church bells. Every head turned. Emily stiffened in her seat, her expression unreadable. Margaret's hand hovered midair, still holding her champagne flute. Someone near the back whispered, "What is he doing?" Ryan turned slowly to face the crowd. "I'm not okay with what just happened," he said, "and I don't think any of you should be either." No one moved. He held the mic now. Someone must have handed it to him, or maybe he just took it. But it didn't matter. He had the floor and every eye. "We laugh at things that are funny," he continued, calm but fierce. "Not at people who have walked into rooms full of judgment and smiled anyway." Allie remained rooted to the spot, Benji's hand still in hers. Ryan glanced back at her. She raised a son on her own. She didn't ask for help. She didn't ask for applause. But she showed up today for her sister. He turned his gaze toward Emily now. "And you turned her into a punchline." Emily's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Ryan faced the room again. "You made her child watch that happen." There was a shudder through the crowd. Some lowered their eyes, others shifted uncomfortably. "She didn't need to be defended," Ryan said. "She was never weak. But I need to speak, because if this is what I'm marrying into, if this is what family looks like, then I need to ask myself what kind of man I want to be." Margaret finally stood. "Ryan, you're making a scene." He turned to her. "No, I'm revealing one." Silence again, the kind that made people itch in their clothes. The kind that demanded someone choose a side, not out loud, but in the quiet of their hearts. Ryan looked once more at Benji and nodded gently. "Your mom is the strongest person in this room." Then, with nothing more to say, he set the microphone down on the nearest table, turned away from the head table, and walked straight out the doors. No one stopped him. Allie didn't speak. Neither did Benji. The chandelier above seemed to blink with them, holding its breath. And in that space, that pause, something shifted forever. The silence after Ryan's departure felt louder than any toast, any music, any laughter that had filled the room before. No one moved. The chandelier sparkled overhead, as if unsure whether it should still shine. Allie stood still, her hand wrapped tightly around Benji's. His fingers were small, but the way he clung to her made her feel rooted, anchored after a storm. Margaret was the first to speak, her voice slicing through the thick hush. "What an ungrateful boy," she snapped, standing with a jolt that nearly toppled her chair. "Embarrassing Emily like that, typical, just like her sister, always making things about herself." But the words didn't land like they used to. No one laughed. No one nodded. Most didn't even look up. Allie took a breath. For the first time in what felt like years, her lungs filled all the way. She turned slightly, guiding Benji around the table. Guests parted for her, not in fear or pity, but something else. A recognition, maybe even respect. A few avoided her eyes. A few looked like they wanted to speak, but their mouths remained closed. Emily remained at the head table, still as glass. Her shoulders had sagged, her smile gone. The golden glow of the spotlight now felt too bright against her stillness. Allie didn't meet her gaze. She didn't need to. Halfway to the door, a voice called gently behind her. "Allie." She turned. It was Frank, her grandfather. He stood slowly, leaning on the back of his chair. His eyes, once sharp and stoic, now looked soft, rimmed with something unspoken. "I should have stopped it," he said, "years ago." She didn't reply, she only nodded. It was enough. She led Benji the rest of the way out, heels clicking softly on the floor. Outside, the air was crisp and still, filled with the scent of wet leaves and distant pine. The sound of muffled music stayed trapped behind the doors. Benji looked up at her. "Are we leaving?" "Yes, baby," she said, brushing his hair back. "We're going home." He squeezed her hand tighter, and they walked toward the parking lot. Two shadows moving quietly under amber streetlights. No applause followed them. No closing song. But for the first time in a long time, Allie didn't feel like the one who'd been left behind. She felt free. The morning after the wedding that wasn't came quietly. The sun filtered through the blinds of Allie's small Portland apartment, casting soft stripes of light across the kitchen floor. The smell of toast lingered in the air. Somewhere in the living room, Benji hummed a quiet tune, his voice steady now, like the night before had only been a dream. Allie sipped coffee from her chipped mug, her phone face down on the table beside her. She wasn't ready for the world, not yet, but the world had found her anyway. The first ping came at 7:14 a.m., then another. By 7:30, her phone buzzed nonstop. She flipped it over. 50+ missed notifications. Unknown numbers, texts, social media tags. A message from Jenna, a former co-worker. "You need to see this. Someone recorded the speech." Allie tapped the link. There, framed shakily in vertical video, stood Ryan, his voice steady, his words clear. And there she was too, still stunned, holding Benji's hand like a lifeline. The caption read, "Groom walks out after bride mocks single mom during speech, then delivers this." Views 52,312, then 53,001. The comments were a wave. "I'm crying. This man is a hero. Single moms deserve better." She held herself with such grace. She didn't flinch. That's real strength. Allie didn't cry. She didn't even smile. She just sat still, feeling something deep inside her loosen, something that had been clenched for years. Later that day, a small bouquet of wildflowers arrived at her door. No card, just a folded piece of paper inside, printed in blocky handwriting. "To the lioness." She didn't need to wonder who sent it. Emily never called. The wedding photos disappeared from her feed. No apology came. Allie didn't expect one. Margaret did call. "I hope you're satisfied," she said coldly. "You embarrassed the family by not laughing along." Allie held the phone to her ear, not angry, just done. "I'm not your scapegoat anymore," she said quietly. Then she hung up. It wasn't a dramatic ending, no slamming, no tears. It was clean, final. That night, after brushing their teeth, Benji looked up at her in the mirror. "Are you still sad about what Aunt Emily said?" Allie paused. "Not anymore," she said. "But why?" Benji shrugged, foam on his chin. "Because I think you won, even though it wasn't a fight." That stayed with her. Because he was right. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't defended herself. She hadn't demanded justice. She had stood, taken her son's hand, and walked out. And someone else, someone unexpected, had decided that silence wasn't enough. Ryan didn't just stand up for her. He reminded a room full of people what love actually looked like. Not the kind in matching rings and white gowns, but the kind that sees someone being hurt and says, "No, not today." In the weeks that followed, life didn't magically change. Allie still worked long shifts, still clipped coupons, still made pancakes twice a week because Benji liked them in the shape of dinosaurs. But she walked differently. She stood taller. And when Benji talked about kindness, about speaking up, she knew he wasn't just talking about Ryan. He was talking about them. One night, tucking him into bed, Benji whispered, "Mom?" "Yeah? I want to be like him when I grow up, but also like you." She kissed his forehead. "You already are." And that was the ending no one expected, but the one she and he deserved. If you've ever been made to feel small in a room where others were clapping, if you've ever smiled through someone else's joke because silence felt safer than truth, then this story is for you. Because strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands up and walks out with dignity still intact. You don't need an apology to begin again. You don't need permission to reclaim your worth. And being alone doesn't mean being wrong. It often just means you were the only one brave enough to be right. To every single mom, every quiet worker, every black sheep sitting at table 9 near the kitchen, you are seen, you are enough, and your story matters. If this story reminded you of your own journey, if it gave you even a moment of strength, share it. Not because it's dramatic, but because sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that change us the most. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing dignity. And thank you for reminding the world that kindness is never weakness.